Let's interpret the slope and the y-intercept of the least squares regression line, sometimes called the line of best fit. Now, we know that y equals mx plus b is slope-intercept form. So here we have the slope, and remember that slope is the change in the y value over the change in the x value. It's the constant rate of change. So that is something just to keep in mind. Now, b represents our y-intercept, which is our initial value. It's our starting point. It's the value when x equals 0. Also, sometimes it's when time is 0. Okay, so let's jump in. 10 students study for an exam in minutes, and their scores are recorded. The equation for the line of best fit is y equals 0.409x plus 62.862. Interpret the slope and the y-intercept. All right, so we're talking about study time in minutes. So you study, that's the input. The output is the exam score. So in thinking about an ordered pair, we have the number of minutes studied, and then we have the exam score. So when you think about the slope, slope is the change in y value. So we're talking about exam scores over minutes studied, okay? I'm a very visual person, so by writing this out, it helps me. So now I know the slope is 0.409. Let's put it over 1. So that means 1 is minute studied. For every minute I study, or whoever studies, my score increases 0.409 points. I know it increases because this is a positive slope, right? Positive slope means it increases. Okay, let's look at the y-intercept. The y-intercept is when time is 0, or in this case, when x is 0. So if minutes is 0, the exam score is 62.862. So if I don't study, right, study 0 minutes, if I don't study at all, my score is expected to be a 62.862. That's the slope and y-intercept here. Let's do one more. You keep track of how many hours of sleep you get, x, and how many cups of coffee you drink the next morning, y. Okay, so we're talking about hours of sleep versus cups of coffee. The equation for the line of best fit is y equals negative 0.7197 plus 8.3207. Interpret the slope and y-intercept. Let's do the same thing. Okay, so slope, change in y over change in x. Y is the cups of coffee. X is the hours of sleep. Let's write what we have. Our slope is negative 0.7197. Put it over 1. Okay, now, you can look at this and say, well, I don't know how to have a negative cup of coffee. Well, that's fine. Let's move the negative to the denominator. Because remember, when you're talking about a negative number, only one of them has to be negative. A negative and a positive, when you're dividing, means negative. So it makes more sense to talk about it this way. For every hour of sleep I lose, right, because it's negative, I drink an additional 0.7197 cups of coffee, which I think is actually pretty accurate in my world, right? When I lose hours of sleep, I increase the amount of coffee. That's what this is saying. So for every hour of sleep I lose, I drink an additional 0.7197 cups of coffee. Now let's look at the y-intercept. The y-intercept means when x is 0. So if I get 0 hours of sleep, if I do not sleep at all, I would expect to drink 8.3207 cups of coffee. Oh man, I would be so jittery. I jitter at 3 cups of coffee. So 8.3 would just put me over the roof. But that's what this is saying. If I don't get any sleep, I'm going to drink 8.3207 cups of coffee, and then I'm going to talk faster than I am right now. but that's the key. So write it all out, knowing what you're talking about. That is how we can interpret the slope and the y-intercept of our least squares regression line.